are back with another Essentials video. I'm really happy with how this series has been progressing along with all the different variety of genres that have been discussed already, and we're once again delving even further, deeper into the world of music by going with perhaps the most niche genre that I'm tackling yet so far out of the genres I've already done, Microhouse. So yeah, I really hope people are enjoying this series. I really hope people have watched the previous videos as well and gotten some great recommendations from them too. I'd love to see what you guys think in the comments. If you want to see this keep going, I will keep it up because I'm enjoying doing it myself as well. And as always, check out my Patreon if you are super interested in being able to request videos like this in the future, or being part of other videos that you can request as well, or even just being part of the Discord server that I have where we talk about music every day in there too. So yeah, please consider that, and of course subscribe and hit the bell and like the video as well. That is always the good stuff. But yes, as I've already said, this is easily the most niche genre that I've tackled so far. It's more of a subgenre of another genre, if anything else really. And I think defining Microhouse albums is actually pretty difficult. And I think there may even be some disagreement within the albums that I've picked in this video that I personally would describe as Microhouse. But I think some people could also put them into different categories as well. And they're not necessarily, you know, albums that are defined by one term. So it's an interesting genre to explore, and it's an interesting video to make because I think there's lots of interesting qualities about this style of music. But the main thing to take away from this really is imagine house music and you're basically minimalizing it really down to more of its bare bones and sort of softer qualities, I guess you could say. It's a deviation from what you'd expect house music to be, you know, loud, brash, heavier maybe with the beats and the bangs and the oomphs and the oomphs, but yet you're getting more influence from perhaps glitch music here, perhaps minimal techno definitely, and even some IDM, which is a term that I'm not the biggest fan of, but you can't really shy away from the fact that these albums I'm going to be talking about certainly can be labelled as IDM. But yes, here we have it, Microhouse, 5 albums that I think are essential for this genre. And the interesting thing about this video is that this is a genre that has been sort of bubbling around since the 90s. And in preparation for this video, I did go back to that distant past of the 90s and check out some albums from there. But nothing really quite clicked with me in the way that these 5 picks do. And it's ended up being that my 5 essential picks have actually all been concentrated into the 2010s. So that either says something about my individual taste or says something about the genre. I guess I'll let you decide as a viewer. But yeah, that is quite an interesting aspect of this video. We got to start with one of the GOATs though, and to be fair to this man, he has been around for quite some time, Fortet. Kieran Hebden is an amazing artist who has a wide range of albums spreading across 20 plus years. He's still going, he's still here today giving us great music. And I had to go with There Is Love in You, which I think is really a bit of a pace setter for how this genre should really think about being. Honestly, I think if you want to make a minimal sounding house album that also is really pushed by really hypnotic and repetitive grooves with fantastic vocal loops and vocal samples that loop on for so long and never get boring and never get annoying, but get stuck in your skull that you cannot possibly let them escape. Love cry, like that. This is how you freaking do it. This is an album for the ages, my friends. This is truly one of the best of its kind and one of the best of the 2010s easily as well. So this had to be on my list. I think any Fortet album really, maybe not any, but a lot of Fortet albums you could argue for this list. But I had to go with what I think is one of his best ever pieces of work, because There Is Love in You has that special place in my heart and has a special place in my friggin' skull. It just won't leave. It just will not leave. And it's an essential piece of Microhouse music. It's really accessible as well. Like I think some of the other picks that I'm going to be mentioning, not quite as accessible as this one, but I think if you are just generally an electronic music fan and you've never heard of this, and maybe you are just a fan of, you know, house and dancey type music, I think this is a good starting place. Going for a more larger scope in sound and shooting for something bigger, I would say for this genre of music is a man called Jon Hopkins. Another name that I think if you are familiar with house or microhouse music generally, you would probably be familiar with Jon Hopkins, and it is an obvious pick just as his forte really, but just in case there are people out there that don't know what this man is capable of doing, then I think this album is really essential to bring up. I think this one might be the more brasher albums in this list, if that's even a word, more of a bit of a head spin, a bit of a head pounder compared to some of the other albums that I'm going to be mentioning here. But I think just for what it achieves in music, in the world of electronic music, it just has to be mentioned because this really is such an intergalactic spatial album that really pushes the sounds in electronic music in such a great way. And I think as an artist, Jon Hopkins has a really strong discography, so I think you could pick and choose different albums from his work, but I really do think Immunity just has that about it that really makes it an essential piece of work across all genres of music really. But yeah, this is truly sensational. The long, really huge, mammoth-sized epic tracks really work in its favour. It's a fantastic album. As I do for this series, I don't just like to go for the immediate obvious picks. I like to pick out some albums that aren't quite as obvious, and I like to pick out albums that are equally as essential, but maybe not talked about enough. I mean, this entire channel is built on that really. Music is amazing regardless of whether it has 1 million listeners or 10 million listeners or 5 listeners really. That's just how music is. If it sounds good, it's frigging good. Who the hell cares at the end of the day? And Gidge had to be mentioned in this video. This album right here is fantastic. It is misty sounding. It is nocturnal at its best. It epitomizes nocturnal. The album cover is exactly what you feel when you listen to this music. It is like a walk in a misty forest. It is so freaking good. There's haunting echoes of backing vocals that pop up on this album as well that really add to the atmosphere. There's some more kind of rhythmic moments as well, but this album right here is absolutely essential in the world of Microhouse. I have to be honest with you, it really is. There's some really beautiful natural sounds that sort of sound quite I guess earthy that come through as well, particularly on the closing track, and it's just really comfy as an album, and I think it's super underrated. I don't know why I never really saw people mention this when it comes to best albums of the year it came out. This is a 2014 album. You never really see it get brought up, but trust me when I say this is great and an essential for the genre for me. You were probably expecting this one. I don't know if you can really bring up this kind of genre of music without mentioning Nicolas Jaar, but Nymphs is amazing. And Nymphs is absolutely fantastic. And if you've watched my Nicolas Jaar Worst to Best, which you should watch if you haven't, you would know how highly I rate this album, because this is just fantastic. It's got the usual abstract Jaarisms that come through while also having these sort of patience testing moments that really creep in your ears quite weirdly and get stuck with you in such an interesting way, while also having the typical grooves and moments that you'd expect from house music. But I think what makes this more minimal than anything else is that it just has a weird way to get to where it's going to be. Like, he doesn't take these tracks in a way that you'd expect. You're sort of pulling weird faces listening to the strange moments that really kind of take you in a weird direction, and then you get the friggin' amazing Swim track, which is just a ridiculous moment in house music. To be honest, it's one of the best songs I've ever heard in this genre. It's an absolute iconic moment for the genre of music to my ears. I think that this track is an insane achievement for the genre, and what Nicolas Jaar does with vocal samples and chopping them up and things, it just creates this really unique experience. And the way he makes fights as well with the jaggedy vocal samples, I just don't know if there's anyone else out there that would really think to do that in the way that he does. So Nicolas Jaar has to be mentioned for this video, and Nymphs is essential. And closing out this essentials list, we have to end on rival consoles, Persona. Again, all of these albums so happen to have come out in the 2010s, and this is, I think, the most recent album of the entire list, I believe. Yeah, coming out only about 5 years ago now, and somehow is an essential of the genre. But I truly believe that because I think Rival Consoles is similar to Gidge in that being an underrated name, an unsung hero of the style of music, but does it so well. I mean, the title track has a bit more of a thump to it, a bit more of an oomph to it, but then there's some more kind of like abstract, strange moments as well, that sort of creep up on you in really interesting ways. And yeah, just a nicely put together album that has a bit more of an electronic sound to it. You could definitely throw this in the IDM category for sure, but I think Rival Consoles has a good knack for rhythm and melody that make these tracks stand out and have that minimal techno feel. So yeah, to me, I think Persona is a great album that should be in your consideration for when you want to explore this genre even further than you already have. And if you've never explored it before, I maybe wouldn't start with this album. I'd certainly start with Fortet, but this should be in your consideration for absolute certainty. And that is it. That is my video. That is my list, my 5 essential Microhouse albums. I hope you enjoyed this one. Definitely good to talk about something a bit more niche compared to some of the other ones I've talked about, but that's what I'm going to be doing for this series. I'm going to be talking about different styles of music. It's never ending. It's never limited either. It is a totally limitless series that I could take for forever and ever and ever and do all kinds of styles of music, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am making these videos. That would be fantastic to see your thoughts in the comments. As always, tell me what your 5 picks would be. Have a good day, subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.